Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Seafarer Social Podcast, where I speak to some of the most inspirational seafarers around the world. Today, I am extremely honored to say that I'm joined by Mr. Dan Tolentino. Daniel is a very well-known figurehead within the Filipino maritime hemisphere. He has a very extensive career in maritime, once serving as a seafarer himself, working his way up to becoming an officer. He then became a training manager and inspired many Filipino cadets coming through. I've actually spoken to so many guys and girls in the Philippines, and they've all said to me, this guy, even if he didn't physically touch their lives, just by hearing about his work and his inspiration that he's given has touched so many Filipino seafarers. And now he's gone on to become a life coach. He recently just finished a fantastic stint at IMEC, where he's working there for eight years, and many people were extremely sad to see him go, but excited to see what his life has to hold in the future. But I just really can't wait to speak to Dan today and get a little bit more of an understanding of his leadership style, what he's teaching seafarers in the Philippines, the future of seafarers in the Philippines, especially after the signing of the Magna Carta.
Mhm.
But before we get into any of that, how are you, Dan?
Hi, Carl. I don't know if I even deserve that praises and recognition, but thank you very much for having me. It's also a pleasure knowing you. Actually, I was always watching your podcast. I've seen several already, and I'm also inspired by a lot of the guests that you have, and of course, I'm also inspired by your work.
Thank you so much, Dan. That really means a lot. So let's get straight into it. So you grew up in which island in the Philippines?
Well, I grew up in Cavite. That's around 1 hour and a half from Manila. Well,
Okay.
in traffic, around 3 hours. It's
Yeah.
very useful. Yeah.
And
Yeah. So, yeah.
what gave you the inspiration to become a seafarer?
Well, my dad is a seafarer, or he was a seafarer. He was a seafarer for 33 years. He's a bosun, and actually, he wanted me to divert my career to elsewhere. So generally, he wanted me to become a lawyer, but money is good in seafaring, so
Yeah.
need
Sure.
comes first. Yeah. So generally, I also wanted to become seafarer because my dad inspired me so much. Even he is not always at home, at least his presence is always felt, especially when he is at home. Yeah. So I feel that I could make an impact and become a seafarer, which is up to his standard. Because as a son, you always wanted to reach the recognition of your dad. So that's what I did, and I believe I achieved it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that one of the common things we hear from the Filipino seafarers are very often they are inspired by some kind of figurehead. Sometimes their father, sometimes a grandfather. Of course, money is always an
Yeah.
important factor. But what I find really interesting from when I'm speaking to Filipino seafarers specifically is that seafaring is actually really attached to the culture of being a Filipino. Because you guys, you have a country which is built up of thousands of islands. Your connection to the sea itself is very deep. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, actually, a lot of Filipinos had been going to the sea. Especially there's a lot of maritime hub, Iloilo, Cebu, Davao. You will find a lot of people there who wanted to venture to the sea, became successful, and somehow inspires a lot of people. Even now, when I work with my previous employer, Maritime Navigation, and also International Maritime Employers Council, we do have a lot of applications coming from those provinces. It's a quite strong community there. Those people who wanted to become seafarer is very prominent because they wanted money.
Yeah,
Generally, the main factor is always money. Of course, there are some secondary reasons like my son is at the back.
it's okay, no problem. We
I'm
can
sorry,
we
as
can
a seafarer, we need to be very spontaneous. We do have this kid who is very
get.
true, a little bit chill. Yeah. So I was saying, we have been prominent in the seafaring industry, at least in manning uh, operations, because a lot of people wanted to uplift their life. Money is a very good motivating factor, and yeah, I think that's somehow is still, as of the moment, very prominent even for the younger generations.
No, I totally agree, and I think that that should always be probably the most important factor. But it still begs the question as to why do you believe, for example, that the Philippines is still the biggest labor market in the world for seafarers? You know, you look at India, you look at China. These countries are obviously emerging economies, um, and you could argue that they're also richer countries as well. But the Philippines, drastically above any other kind of country, supplies more seafarers to the shipping industry than anybody else. Why do you think that is?
Well, actually, we do had a survey or a report regarding that happened 2 years ago when I was heading the cadet task force, and we wanted to get the pulse not only of the Filipino, because of course if you ask Filipinos, of course there are some bias. So we asked at least 300 people in different nationalities, and we asked if PH is still a powerhouse manning capital of the world in the future. And the result is around 88% still believes that Philippines is still a powerhouse manning in the future. And what is the reason for that? Generally, cost. Let's be honest. There's a lot of good seafarers as well in Europe, but however, there's a little bit quite more expensive as compared to the Filipinos. Another one is because we are already deep rooted, we are already trusted by a lot of ship owners or ship managers, and I do believe peop- Filipino people, even the government is capitalizing on that because they know that since we are very professional in our actions, in what we do, especially on the ships, I believe they're trying to maximize it by promoting it more. And yeah, I think that somehow works, and it will work until the next probably 10 years to 15 years.
And how do you think that the new signage of the Magna Carta, which is something that the Philippines has been crying out for such a long time now, how do you think now that the president has signed the Magna Carta, this will affect the future of seafaring for Philippines?
Yes. Well, before the Magna Carta, there was always a issue in terms of the ambulance chasing. Everybody somehow is quite afraid of getting Filipinos because there's a tendency of abuse from the lawyers. Now, this is an additional protection for the employers and also for the seafarers, and that somehow builds the trust again of our European counterparts. That somehow, at least the government able to give additional layer of protection for them to have a fair service, to have a fair employment, that it will not be somehow jeopardized by some alligators or some people who just wanted to get money from seafarers who had been repatriated. Seafarers need support, and it's within the contract. And I always believe that our employers, especially for those whom I know, are very, very supportive of Filipinos. It's just that before the Magna Carta was signed, there's a lot of abuse that is happening. And I think the main gist now of the Magna Carta is to give confidence not only to employer but also to the Filipinos that they will be protected, or at least their income will be protected.
Yeah, and I think this is super important. I know, like I said, I spoke to many of my network in the Philippines, and they were all massively celebrating the signing of of the Magna Carta, and I'm very
Well,
happy
it's
that
a
this
long time
finally
coming.
came. Yeah, very long time. Why do you think it took so long to get done?
Well, politics. Let's say it like that.
Yeah,
There's a lot of contradicting opinions, and very much so. There should always be a contradicting opinions. Everybody has their interests, their opinions, and it should be heard. And I believe sometimes the time that it took for our president to sign it, he took time to understand more, to ask more for the people who do have the knowledge and who will be greatly affected by the Magna Carta. So yeah, it took time, but Well, it is signed, so I do hope that the IRR will be fair as well, and it will be somehow reflecting so much on what we wanted for the Philippine maritime industry.
Yeah, likewise. Totally agree. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, Dan, is I was actually living in the Philippines for 2 years myself. I was living in Makati, and I remember when I would go to Rizal Park, and you see you see they have the Seafarers Corner where
Mm-hmm.
every
In
single
Luneta?
day. Yeah, sorry, forgive me. In Lanetta Park, yeah, that's right.
Yes, yes.
When when you go to the Seafarers Corner every single day, you see dozens, sometimes over 100 seafarers waiting there every day with their CVs, hoping that the recruiter comes by and gives them an opportunity. One of the things I observed from speaking to some of these seafarers is that many of them are completely able-bodied seamen, but a lot of them have sometimes been signed off, maybe because of an underlying health condition. So if they're diabetic, for example, a shipping company will no longer want to take the risk because of insurances, etc. What do you think of this situation in terms of seafaring? Is it a young man's game? And do you think that some of these seafarers that have been, working for years, and are still, able to do the job, do you think that they have been unfairly, or do you think you can understand it from the employer's perspective as well?
Well, I believe it's not a young man's game. It's not about the age. It is a fit man's game. You need to be fit for purpose. Yeah, so you will be going there and you need to be fit medically, physically, emotionally, everything fit. This is the most important certificate that you will have, because that somehow ensures the confidence of the employer, of the money agency, that you will last on board. We don't want people who goes on board and then they get sick, right? Because it is detrimental for the other seafarers, it is detrimental for the ship, and also it is detrimental for yourself. Now, of course, there are some circumstances that I believe certain areas, for example, pre-diabetic and all, and some companies are very strict in their medical rules and guidelines. And I cannot blame them for that. To each on his own. I always believe that if their standard is really high, it's up to the seafarers now to somehow be fit enough to go to a company where he will be successfully accepted, because he is clicking all the boxes for the recruitment. It shouldn't be a compromise, especially when we're talking about health. It should always be very objective. Yeah, so yeah, I feel for a lot of my colleagues in the industry who cannot join the vessel, but of course we need to do our legwork. Otherwise, if you allow one thing to happen, then the precedents will always come. So I applaud those people who wanted to still continue, but they still really need to work on, or at least us, we really need to work on our health. So I just have been declared fit so, for to work. So I'm happy.
Have you had problems in the past with your health?
Well, I was repatriated because I had an accident on board last 2010 where I lost my index finger, my right index finger. So I was repatriated. I was declared unfit to work on board. That's why I ventured to the work ashore. But now that I will be traveling elsewhere and I will be working in Sharjah Maritime Academy as a cadet training manager, a very very good academy. There is a requirement for PEME, and that I just passed it. So
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I actually did read up that you had a career changing mooring accident, if I'm
I
correct.
did, yes.
and and this is kind of why I wanted to ask you about the medical side of things, because I guess you have the perspective of understanding, right? Because somewhat you're right. I understand that I didn't realize you'd lost your index finger, but I guess that most of the jobs at sea you could probably still do. However, of course, from the shipping company's perspective, they don't want to take the risk due to insurance policies. I also read somewhere that during your recovery, you were living in Germany. Is this
Yes,
correct?
yes, because I had 10 operations all in all. So I just undermined my accident that I only lost an index finger, but actually my three fingers were crushed, but two were recovered. One unfortunately didn't make it. Then I had a skin grafting on the side. So that's why I was declared to be unfit for sea duty. So I do understand it. I accepted it somehow. And then when I accepted that, I know for a fact that I need to do something for myself. That's why when I was in recovery period, I also work in Germany, a part time, encoder. I worked there in a Siemens mission as cashier. I tried to assist a lot of Filipino seafarers going back and forth, and getting some support from them, especially financially, because I was also struggling during that time. So, yeah, I'm trying to make the most of it and also learning the ins and out of the industry in a different sector now, especially ashore side, because I tried to learn more how things work in the ship management office. So that's what I did in my two
Yeah,
years in Hamburg.
yeah, and I think that's really important. I mean, one of the things I'm a big believer in is that everything happens for a reason. You know, sadly, obviously, you had your accident, and at the time you wasn't able to work. But perhaps if that never happened, you wouldn't have been in a position today where you've managed to beneficially touch the lives of thousands of cadets. And I did read up that you were, like I said, in Hamburg, and you were working as a ship agent, crewing staff. I even read somewhere that you were doing a bit of choir singing, which I know is a big thing for the Filipinos. I know you guys love singing.
A little bit, a little bit. I usually when I was in Hamburg, I was singing in church. I was singing for weddings. I was singing for funeral. As long as I will able to save much, because I know when I return back to the Philippines, I need to gear up again, try to apply it, and I need to have that money that I could be sustained in my journey in finding a new employment. So I try to prepare in advance.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, good for you. We got to make sure we got the money coming in, and we keep hustling. Dan, many people that I've spoken to have said they refer to you as Big Bro Dan,
Yeah,
and the reason why is because you've given so much guidance to them over the years. What do you think is the most important thing in establishing such a close and trusted relationship with cadets? And how has your mentoring style impacted your work?
I always believe that leadership transcends rank. If you wanted to handle people, you don't look at it that you work for them or they work for you. You always need to work with people. You need to be felt, you need to be understood, and you need to also to understand them, especially for the younger generations now. It's a different ball game. They have different understanding, and they have different ideas on how they wanted to pursue their career. So a little bit of compromise and trying to work in balance. If you say something, do your best to work on it. Lip service is a no-go, especially in leadership. In any case that you have promised something, words are extremely important, but more importantly is the action. If you didn't seconded your promise or at least your affirmations to them, then the trust will crumbles, and it will somehow have a precedence. You need to always look after the people you want, always try to have a barrier as well, because for me, I've been in my previous work in IMEC, I've been handling 1,300 cadets. That's quite tough. That's as many as probably that's the biggest one a training manager could handle in the Philippines. So handling such big diverse brains and talents requires a lot of effort as well. So you need to be organized on your time, but try to give time at least per batch or at least per person, but always try to be there. A lot of younger generations now, when they ask questions, actually they know already the answer. It's just that they wanted some confirmations or affirmations if what they are doing is correct. Just try to be there, try to be present. Um, yeah, always work with people. And the best skill in learning, it's is listening. You try to listen to everyone. If you will look at it, I do have 1,300 cadets. If everybody has a problems, those are 1,300 problems that you need to
Yeah,
deal with. And those are 1,300 solutions as well that somehow could be added on your mind. That's so amazing if you will look at it in a different perspective.
that's so powerful, and I couldn't agree more. And I think it's so nice that so many cadets have leveraged have looked upon you as a big brother. I think that's such a nice honor to have, and you're right. It's because you're able to provide solutions with them and help them through their problems. And 1,300 cadets is just an insane number. Um, One of the things I also wanted to ask you about was maritime education. I mean, in your presentation at the Nautical Institute annual general meeting, you highlighted the need to adapt maritime education to the specific needs of seafarers today. Now, ships are changing very quickly. New fuels, autonomous shipping, and the requirement for understanding how vessels operate is becoming more innovative in the future, and this is going to require a higher level of education. What are some of the key changes or or innovations that you believe are essential in maritime training so that the Filipino seafarer stays future ready?
Hmm. Actually, if you will look into AI or if you will look into the new developments, I think there's a lot of sector already looking into it. There's already a big chunk of training, amazing training providers who do have the knowledge, the know-how to provide these trainings, and they are well connected with the, with the manufacturer of the engine, so they know what they're doing. They know what is up to what will be the future of the industry. What I think, because in my presentation in the Nautical Institute, what I think is missing is trying to understand the current seafarers and the young and the future seafarers. We really don't have any demographics of what the seafarers want. How long will they be at sea? What would be the future? Everybody is so focused on what are the training needs or the gap analysis that we need to somehow cover, but we are not really tapping into if is there any seafarers still to be trained in the future? Will we be training again after 3 years or after 4 years because the rotation of the market for the manning people is already, you know, because seafarers only wanted to stay 4 years or 5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah, so generally, I think what we need to prioritize is or give focus on as well is trying to understand the current demographics of the seafarers, not only the Filipinos but also different nationalities. And it's somehow easy to do. You just need to have certain good questions that will capture what you want. Then probably big institution like ICS or IMO will try to to make use of it and then give it to the people, to the employers, so that they will be able to understand what will be also in the future, not only focusing on the technology, because maritime is not only technology but also the people.
yeah, I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. One of the things that I focus on a lot is helping maritime businesses, the shipping companies, the crewing agents, the satcom businesses, the charities as well. I like to speak to these organizations and tell them about the power of social media.
Hmm.
Social media is becoming very very big with everybody. In particular, I've seen a huge growth in the Filipino seafaring industry. We have, tons of seafarer influencers from Casey Abigail Chinsu to Howie Smart Beret to Chief McCoy, Ivan Guzman, um, you know, Bjarni Edward. The list is just like ever
Yes.
growing. And these guys and girls, they have probably more power than they realize because what they're actually doing is they're inspiring a whole labor market, essentially. They're giving people a glimpse into the reality of what this career is.
Exactly.
And I think, from the next generation and also the current generation, I think social media is a very powerful tool. What's your perspective on social media and how it can be used effectively within seafaring to improve things like recruitment, retention, and so on and so forth?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. It's so good for marketing purposes, for sharing of knowledge, for sharing of information, for releasing your inner thoughts. That's so amazing. But it's also had been abused by so many people, especially for those people who wanted to poach seafarers from elsewhere or who wanted to manipulate people just to have likes, not endangering other seafarers just to have likes or just to have an engagement. And I do know some, and actually I always, because some of these guys I also know, some of these guys I've trained before, and they ventured to this platform for as a influencer. I always inform them that of course we need money, but we should not utilize our power, because if you have a voice, we need to have a good voice, not only by singing, but you need to somehow reflect the professionalism that you have in your license, also in what you are doing as an influencer, because you are somehow tapping the industry. So if you wanted to clickbait or to fear monger just to have a tons of like, that's a no go for me. But if you wanted to promote your business, if you wanted to share information, to be an inspiration, to motivate other people, of course that is very very useful in a way. I utilize my platform to share insights and to give information, to give motivation, not only to the seafarers but also to their families. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not on the level of Biyahe ni Edward or all, but a lot of your I don't want to say followers, but a lot of your friends somehow they know who they need to watch. So you have your own market. Let's say it like that. And of course, you need to protect that market, and you need to ensure that you are professional enough to share something which is valuable, because they are also sharing something valuable, and that is time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think um, one of the things I find really interesting is speaking sometimes to the crewing agents and getting their perspective on social media, because so often we speak to the influencers in the seafarer, and they view it from one angle, but it's also important to view it from the employer's perspective as well. And you're right, creating a positive message is important. I do sometimes think that creating a realistic message is also important, because if I'm going into an opportunity, I do want to fully understand the positives and the negatives. Just because if you don't understand, and if you don't understand negatives, you're going to have a bad surprise in the future. Whereas if you know what's coming up, you're more prepared. I think that you are right though. I think what's really interesting is to see the change though in the type of content that's going out with the next generation, the young guys, compared to maybe the generation before. I mean, the first Filipino seafarer social media star that I ever came across was Chief McCoy. Chief
Yeah.
McCoy, obviously, big follower on YouTube, and I think Chief McCoy provides really valuable content, because he's not the kind of guy that's going to be doing, TikTok dances on the deck. But what he's doing is he's providing very valuable, informative content, which you learn something from, right? So he's vlogging his lifestyle at sea, but
Yeah.
he's teaching his audience something in the meantime. Whereas today's seafaring influencers, the younger guys and girls, they're focusing more on the 60, 90-second short format video. Sometimes it's like quickly changing frame shots. But what I like about it is it shows the beauty of seafaring. Some of these images they capture are really good. I really like Howie Smart Beret. He's a young guy that's just come out of who's growing on Facebook. Really young guy. He has amazing images and videography. I really like Ivan Guzman as well. I think he's fantastic, and I like how one of the things Ivan's doing on his TikTok channel now is he's taking messages, comments that other seafarers and
Yeah.
Filipinos have posted on him, and then he's responding to them in real time. I really like this kind of stuff. But my big thing that I think is really important is that inspiring the next generation to make sure that we never run out of seafarers, I think, is very important. And I think that's what these guys and girls are doing. Yes, the number one primary factor is going to be money, and I understand that. Um, but making seafaring appealing is also important as well, because
Yes.
one of the sad things about seafaring and shipping industry as a whole is the only time you ever hear a story in the media is when something bad's happened, right? The media never cover the good stories. So actually, this means that these seafarer influencers and these people that are taking this content, they are the only guys and girls out there that are creating positive content around seafaring, which I think is really important, especially for the other markets as well. You know, like we always talk about the Philippines, but we need to make sure that Chinese, Indian, European seafarers are still applying and they want to be at sea. And I think that the Filipino seafarer influencers and the social media guys from around the world have a really big responsibility.
Yeah, actually, I don't want to take away from the people who are dancing, who are singing bits and pieces in TikTok and all. They know their audiences.
Yeah,
And it's fun actually. If you will watch it, it's it's time consuming in a way, but it somehow relieves you from stress, and that's fun. What I'm somehow against is if they are jeopardizing already their safety and the safety of the crew just to get likes, just to have an engagement. That's a no for me, for the contract, for the employer, and of course, when you go to the ship, there's always this big sign, safety first, right? So that somehow should be embedded in the mind of everybody. Of course, they wanted to gain followings and all, but of course, when they are in the home on board, they need to adhere to the safety first.
yeah, I totally agree. Safety is always the number one most important factor. I have one last question for you, Dan.
No problem.
You've been through a lot in your career, and I want to learn a little bit more about your personal drive and inspiration. So, after you've experienced the accident, you went through the recovery period. There was probably times where you were worried about your income and your future, and now, fast forward, you've become a very respected maritime leader within the Philippines,
No.
and no, and I have to give you your flowers. And what continues to inspire you to stay deeply involved in the maritime industry, and what inspired you to do your 8 years at IMEC, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about what your future holds.
Yes. Well, what inspires me is to follow my 3H: happy, holy, and healthy. Happy, holy, and healthy. Yeah, so whatever my decision is, even before, I always look into that somehow it makes me happy. You know, it doesn't go to away from my moral standards, and of course it doesn't really affect my lifestyle too much, especially I value my time with my family, I value my time with my friends and my colleagues, I have my social time. So somehow I want balance in a way. So whenever that I go venture somewhere else, I always look into it that my 3H, this 3H is the non-negotiables, and I wanted to make sure that that is also a priority of mine. Now, in terms of uh, what what is my driving force, because I do believe in this industry. This is a very noble industry. My sister is a seafarer until now. My dad was a seafarer. My other sister was a seafarer. I was a seafarer. So somehow the seafaring industry, the sea, gave us an opportunity to grow uh, as a family, to to be professional, and to it opens a lot of doors for us to be elsewhere, to reach for the stars. So generally, I'm very thankful for the industry, and as a way of thank you, I'm also giving it back in a different form, not only as a seafarer but also training the seafarers of the future. Of course, I've trained thousands as well of seafarers in Marlo when I was a training manager there. Then I've trained thousand as well of seafarers when I was training manager in IMEC, and now I will be going to Sharjah Maritime Academy as a cadet training manager. This is a new adventure for me because I will be training Arab cadets. This is quite new in the market. I usually talk to some of my colleagues, especially the ship owners and ship managers. They are also curious of what Arab or the UAE cadets have in store for the industry. So that is somehow an untapped market, and I wanted to check how we could able to flourish more because of course it's good to have seafarers from different areas or places because it gives a diverse and also a cultural change that is very productive for the sea. So I believe it is an untapped market, and I will be venturing there. I do hope that I could also provide guidance to these young people as what I have done for the Filipinos because I also trained Indian, Ukrainian, Russian before. So this is a new market for me, and I do hope that the universe will guide me to do the same thing for
Well, thank you very much, Dan, for taking the time to speak to me today. It's been
oh
an absolute pleasure. I'm really, really honored to have this discussion with you, and I wish you all the best and all the luck in the world, and God's praise for your new position. I think it's amazing that you've done your work in the Philippines, you've done your work in Europe, and now it's time for you to take on a new challenge.
yeah.
And I think that regardless of where you are, you will always lead by inspiration. So thank you so much, Dan. It really means a lot. And yeah, I had a great time.
Thank you, Carl, and I wish you well.